I found the resume. I also found a bunch of cool posters. Um, but I wanted to show you my photographic resume. I stopped keeping up with it maybe 5 or 6, 7 years ago, maybe. And well, of course, all of us move on to the iPad and we have online portfolios, what have you. And for so many years, I was building this book, and I just found it in this box and was moving it to another box. And I thought, well, I'm going to show it to you. And anyways, here's my book. And I've had a lot of students say, well, what do you do during interviews, or what did you do during your interviews? And my thing was always to turn the book to the prospective employer and let them enjoy it, let them have some time to digest things, but not leave them completely alone. I always felt that it was okay to give a little anecdote to kind of let them know what you had experienced and what you might be bringing to them. And here, this is Lady in the Water. This maquette was not very well received. It moved a little bit more into the simian as opposed to the tree. And so my employers had me go ahead and make it much more tree-like and much more mysterious. But at this stage, being a fan of Rick Baker, I got myself a cool, kind of pissed off expression, and I got some great hangs by elongating this compartment of the hands. And so I took a picture of that. That changed on the floor, though, and didn't exist very long, but I really enjoyed really more of the body stance on that. But once again, when I show my portfolio, I let people, the employer, guide the meeting. I'm not going to be pushy or anything, but I will give them little anecdotes. Here's Superman Returns, which was such a fun thing. ADI had this project, and I saw Tom Woodruff in the mall, and I told him I would love to be part of it. And he said, we're all crewed up. And so I kind of, love, a big fan of Superman always, especially the Christopher Reeve original Superman. And I just really wanted to be part of that. Many months after I had seen Tom, I got a call from Russ Schinkel over at Film Illusions. He had picked up the job, and we had this sculpture done in a week with the notes from Brian Singer. No, nothing sculptural, everything form driven. So we didn't have like sculpted ribs or anything, and everything read very naturally. And well, a lot of research was done by ADI, and a lot of problems had been answered already. So it was easy for me to close that within a week. Wonderful, and I do love the movie. Not a very intense action movie, but a wonderful love letter, if you will, to Christopher Reeve. Very proud of that. Here was Battle Los Angeles. Gosh, this is quite a while ago now. I was the lead sculptor on this, and I had many union fellows come in and assist. And this was all done in Chavant, because at the time we thought, well, we're going to make a silicone creature. It probably could have been wet clay, but we had so many little parts and so many little sections that had to come off and be molded separately. It really was a good thing to go at this in Chavant clay. And here you see I stayed on to paint a little bit, and we did some wonderful stuff. The director had worked with another sculptor for months on a maquette that I believe was about 22 inches tall. And the interesting thing about this job was that I was given the maquette by Joel Harlow and said, that's it, that's exactly what we need. And so this is really a reproduction job. Through caliper and measurement, we were able to go ahead and create this fellow. Really creepy, really weird creature. Magilla Gorilla for Tom Woodruff. Thank you for that, Tom. That was a lot of fun. This one was a very large sculpture, and they got some eyes out of Texas, as I recall, from a man and wife team that did the eyes, if I'm correct on that. Here was a sculpture I did. I had gotten laid off from K&B, and I was new in the business. And that was the first time I started to get used to being laid off with no warning, which happens in our business. It's kind of an expectable thing. And I took that energy of, well, what happened? And I pushed it into this clay. Good thing to do with your time down. Scooby-Doo. This was a wonderful sculpture in wet clay. You know, I have to tell you a great thing about this. We get so lost in our sculpting and our narrative and what have you. And I had sculpted Scooby straight. and meaning that he didn't have a head turn. And I'll never forget, I had got him blocked out, up and running, and Woodruff came over. And Woodruff, wonderful guy, more of in charge of the bidding in the front office. And he felt that it needed something, so he grabbed the whole head and, and jammed it off to one side. And that really helped the sculpture because you can see here, parallel to his breast, he's looking to the side. And that gave him also a curious thing, as well as dropping one ear down and leaving one ear up, asking a question, if you will. But that was scanned. This was in the early days of CGI. This was scanned, and they went for a much more cartoony look. Mine was much more naturalistic. And you can see these forms here. Beautiful shapes and forms. This was my first time using the rubber tip tool. And I had a great time with it. Right in this area, I was able to create kind of a softness, an organic feel that was a pleasure to stumble on. Love those tools. Here with Blade, very much following what Steve Wang had laid down in the rhythm and the design. I was keying the arms. I believe Hiroshi was on the chest and the back, and Steve, of course, was guiding the head and guiding all of our movements. After the sculpture was over, I proposed doing a small language, a demonic language that would run throughout the detail I had put in, because I put a lot of faux language in. And so I was able to enhance that with the wildfire paint. And on set, they had a wonderful blacklight structure, multiple tubes running and on a dimmer switch so they could go boom, 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 boom. And you'd see a heartbeat emanate in blue light coming out from inside the suit. Wonderful. Yeah, Team America, what a great job. A lot of this was established by Norman Tempia. He had done whatever movie stars were done that you don't see here. He had already done those and established this. I'm very proud to have sculpted the Matt Damon. He became kind of a cultural thing, and the boys had talked about how silly the puppet was. That's beautiful. We were following kind of the established style of Thunderbirds. And I remember this was so interesting for me because the first thing I sculpted was Martin Sheen. Here we have Martin Sheen, George Clooney, Sam Jackson, Tim Robbins, Matt Damon, of course, and Peter Jennings. And I was doing little likenesses, and Norman Tempia, quite rightfully so, came up. He says, "Dawn, you're overthinking. You're doing too much detail." He says, "You got to pretend that you hit yourself in the head with a hammer and keep everything simple." Boy, he was right. And after this one, I got a little bit more of the rhythm. I just pick like 2 or 3 elements of the movie star that I could key into. Once you kind of got that going, like Helen Hunt's upper eyelids, for example, or George Clooney's smile, you just needed 2 elements to kind of tie into the actor, and the general shape would take care of the rest. If you overcomplicated it or tried to do a little portrait, it would become very strange, very odd. Nevertheless, Team America, fuck yeah, what a wonderful show. Tom Cruise, Vanilla Sky, being raised on Dick Smith's makeups, and also being so astonished when he would get into the subtraction, like in The Sentinel, the removal of the ghost's nose, and Dick Smith's gore, being so much of a student of John Chambers and then Dick Smith early in life. Any chance to challenge ourselves with gore or realism was fantastic. Cameron Crowe had requested a monster version of Tom. I remember I did a maquette of Tom while I was in New York working on makeups and while we were doing tests. I remember I did this maquette showing the backstory of what the makeup on the makeup, and Tom didn't like that. He didn't like seeing himself torn up, understandably so. He told me to get that out of there. But a wonderful employer. We had a great time. We did more test makeups on Vanilla Sky than I've ever done on any other film, and absolute pleasure to work on that. Here, I believe this was Looney Tunes, the movie. And the thing I recall about this that was so wonderful was they had contacted Bob Burns. And Bob had a casting of the original Metaluna mutant from This Island Earth. which for a fan like me is pure thrill. And they brought in the original head from the original movie, and I wanted to honor what had been done. I'm kind of a purist. I don't want to change anything in favor of my own narrative. So I tried to stay close to what was so eerie about the face. I added a temple, and the employers supported me in that. And I feel like I was able to get a little bit more play as far as veinage, and the membrane that would support the nictating or the firing of this fleshy stuff that surrounded the eye. But somehow a temple worked in well, and I got into the rhythm of sculpting brain. I can see now that some of it was not totally successful, and some of it was pretty good. Anyways, well, hindsight is 2020. Here's a maquette that I believe was about, looking at this, maybe about 20 inches tall. Whenever we could do a maquette, it was always a wonderful rehearsal. I remember I figured out how to kind of get these arms bowed, and I thought of them as being like a lobster shell and having kind of that attitude or that feeling in their construction. And then much like Boris Karloff and his hands in Bride of Frankenstein, Karloff's thumb would align with the line of his arm out like that, and then he would have this beautiful expression in his hands. That's actually echoed in here, so that along the line of the arm, we continue with the thumb, so you get things kind of turned out, which seemed apropos for that. Fun sculpture, web play at that time, and they threw a lot of mechanisms in it. Something that Woodruff and I talked about that was never done was to have fiber optics put inside, sprinkled, and have them surface across the brain, so that when the synapses would fire and the eyes would nictate, we would have like an electrical shock of light travel through the brain. That never came to fruition, but certainly fun to talk about at the time. This project lost its funding. I don't know what became of that here on the Fantastic Four. I had so much fun sculpting fists. And if you look at my fist, you can see, even though it's a four-fingered hand, a lot of my structure is in there. You can see that especially so here. And I also sculpted the suit and the faceting. Now, Chet Zar had done the face and a beautiful job on it, as well as the cowl. And as I recall, Jose Fernandez and I became friends on this, and he shared what tool he had used on his design maquette, which was fantastic for getting the faceting and working out little sub-planes to complement the rocks. I have to say, I never felt so good about seeing the foam wrinkle. And if I could live my life over again, a lot of the subdivisions of rock would have been perhaps separated down to the core, given a hard surface so that they could shift and move against each other. There's a scene where Ben Grimm looks to the side, and you see all that is rock in his neck do an obvious stretching that's foam. And I always winced at that, but still very proud of that, and especially proud of being on the hand crew. You can see my hands there. And this, of course, back here, that's all Chet Zar. Wonderful. And that was for Spectral Motion. After working on Green Lantern and being in New Orleans when the Saints won and during Mardi Gras, which was a one-of-a-kind experience, thanks to Joel Harlow. Joel and I went to the aquarium while we were there working on that, and we started to sculpt and visualize mermaids and through drawings and maquettes and what have you for the upcoming Pirates movie. And I remember sitting there in that aquarium and just kind of, sometimes you have to, whatever you do, you pinch yourself or you thank your God or whatever you do, you just have to remind yourself, I'm very lucky to be part of a design phase. Here, not being a great Photoshop guy, I found a female form that I thought was pleasing and tried to texture and paint and do some stuff here. This is a hand drawing. I can see I was inspired by Carlos Fuentes' work right in there. And then this is, my goodness, this is a stingray that has a jellyfish, a symbiotic relationship with a jellyfish and a humanoid head that's protected through through the skin of the jellyfish. Bizarre, fun. And then more Pirates stuff here. These are just little kind of fading black and white pictures here, but I spent a lot of time doing different designs. This was based on a Miles Tevis design where we had kind of beautiful strips that would flank the body of the mermaids. We tried so many different variants. Here's a bra of scales, and well, lots of appliances for the pirates as well. Fun show, and we went to Hawaii. We went to Kauai and did a lot of that work in the back of the Marriott there. Wonderful memories of doing that and the kindness of Joel Harlow. Now, these things are from just my own work. Yeah, model kit stuff, future fossils. Well, there's a guy with a strong ego. Look, Don Lanning's Monsterland. That was my company I fantasized about for making model kits when I was a younger fella. Cat in the Hat, what a fun thing. You know, sometimes you don't ask your employers, you just go ahead and you follow your method or whatever you think should happen. Here I did a life-size drawing, and with the agreeable management went over to Kinko's at the time and blew up a life-size 7 or 8 foot tall Cat in the Hat. Here you can see the actor in there and the young lady that's on the Cat in the Hat's back in this TV commercial. And here to, once again, to look at an established artist's work like the gentleman that did, forgive me, I'm blanking on this right now, but the man who did the Cat in the Hat, it's not Sendak, I'm sorry, forgive me. But to once again look at his style and see that, and to try to get rid of myself and just keep the forms beautiful and soft and do honor to that property. Oh, what a wonderful thing. Well, an aquatic creature, you know, we all love aquatic creatures. From the creature from the Black Lagoon forward, I think all of us love to take a shot at their creature, and that was called the Wave Ripper. Goodness, I must be proud of this. I put a date in there, 4203. Here with ADI, you know, my memory of this is that we were all very excited because it was a Predator movie. The movie wasn't that good, certainly, but this beloved property, I was able to revisit Stan Winston's Predator body. Bruce Fullen and I sculpted this. I believe he and I flipped a coin, and I got the front, he got the back. He essayed the back beautifully. And what you see here is what I did. I think Bruce may have something to do a little bit with the knees as well. But that's my work there in the front. Bruce and I closed that story in about 7 days. And also drawing. I'm not a professional guy for drawing, but I threw my hand in and was able to give variants. I enjoyed that samurai kind of look. And then this is the most interesting thing. The director was coming in. The boys knew that they probably would get the show because they had a relationship with him from Mortal Kombat. And so I just went ahead and did a wet clay, a water-based clay maquette. And I remember the director came in and I laid a dish of water out and these strips of material. By the time their meeting was over, they had gotten together, the management and the director, and they had dressed this maquette, which was water-based anyways, with pieces of cloth and wrapping. And of course, I had sculpted what was the first attempt at armor on the classic Predator. And so that was a lot of fun. Oh my gosh. And I'll never forget, Woodruff came out of the meeting and jumped into the air, kicked his foot to his other foot, and they had gotten the show. Not so much because of these things, but because they had a great meeting, but these things surely didn't hurt. Wayne Toth, wonderful fellow that I started with in 97 at K&B. As I was coming into the business, I believe Wayne was starting to get into his own retail experience and eventually left the business to open these wonderful stores that are year-round Halloween stores. And he came back and hired me. He's a wonderful fella for Rob Zombie's H2. I have to tell you, I never saw the movie. I can't really comment on that. But to create pumpkin characters for a Halloween movie and some gore, once again, how fun is that? Steve Wang and I worked together for many years. And I learned a lot from Steve. Just working with Steve, you can't help it. You can't help but learn certain ways of dealing with wet clay. And certainly, one of the strangest knowledges, which is kind of an unspoken thing, was when you work with Steve Wang, you learn about how to, in dealing with suits, this isn't a suit, this is a one-off for another purpose, but I did a lot of suits with Steve, and in doing that, you learn how to prepare the body cast, how to shave down the wrists, how to shave down the crotch in the armpits. And a lot of this is not so much instinctual, but there's a certain value to it. And by doing that and watching Steve do it, I have this wonderful knowledge of how to go ahead and shave down an actor's body cast so that the foam suit or the suit that's going to be made off that body cast fits like a glove. So it sucks right down around the wrist. The suit pulls up into the crotch. It pulls up into the armpits, and once again, that's all done in the pre-preparation of the body cast. Wonderful, wonderful stuff that I learned from Steve Wang. This was his first character for E3, as I recall. I didn't do much. I think I sculpted the legs. I can't really remember too much, but I think I may have sculpted the armor on the feet, what have you. I know Steve did the head, and he must have done the chest and what have you, but what a fun thing to go to that big show with these wonderful things. And I think Steve has made a career in part from that as well. Hollow Man. Well, I got to work with a wonderful guy, a wonderful group of fellas on this. Andy Schoenberg and I worked on this melted, mutated gorilla, which was seen for like 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000 maybe, in a clip within the movie, like a Super 8 film that's being shown in the movie to a group of people. So you only see him for a second, but he's gross and hard to look at. The burn masks for Kevin Bacon were a lot of fun. I got to do multiple versions. We weren't going to burn foam latex masks. We were able to keep in control of how the masks burned. And we're able to do that by doing a sculpture one-off for each stage. And wonderful stuff. Silent Hill. I was playing Silent Hill, the game, at the time with my girlfriend at the time, and she introduced me to it. And how fun when you're able to jump onto a property that is currently in your life. And that video game was very creepy. I think it was Silent Hill 2 that I was playing at the time. This was through Patrick Totopoulos, and this was the body of Pyramid Head. So a lot of these cuts and a lot of these contusions are caused by the edge of the helmet. At least that was my thinking. And it was a full chest piece. Initially, a wonderful sculptor had started the chest piece, but became ill or something, or got the flu. And because of brevity of time, I was able to jump in and complete the chest, and then the arms are completely mine. I think there's very little of the chest left of his work, and I'm going to say that was Dave Smith who had that, and he had started a wonderful chest, but once again, I took over that. And here's a wonderful thing. Steve Johnson had Where the Wild Things Are, and then it had gone around town, and then I believe it had come back to Steve, but there was a time where Mike Elizalde wanted to throw his hat in, and he hired me to do some maquettes of the classic characters. You don't really need to redraw Maurice Sendak. This was more of a rehearsal for me. And also, my goal was to add a little bit of realism and a little bit of psychosis in these characters. Never got to do that one. He's probably the most crazy looking one. But I was able to get in some realistic kind of textures and what have you in the Carol. And isn't it funny? Sometimes it's the little things that tip over a sculpture or a character for us. Just doing a little bit of that beautiful landscaping, and then the body language on the upright or the flipping of the toe up had such a great meaning for me. I know that sounds like a minor thing. You have all this hair work and you have the horns and it's the bull character. Here, there's so much there to chew on. Isn't it funny? I would be talking to you about the lifting of the toe, but the way that toe lifted and the freedom and the joy and the chubbiness of the toes and the attitude of the little toe over there. Sometimes it's the little things that really send things into the stratosphere. Here's another note for you guys. This is my initial block out of Carol. And I had done it with the mouth closed. And it read well, it looked nice, but I could tell something was not firing right. It was hard for me to ferret it out. I believe Moto came by and said, maybe you should open the mouth. Wonderful sculptor. Moto's no longer with us, but a very brilliant fella. I went home on my own, off the clock. I cracked the mouth, and then I brought it in, and everybody agreed that the smile read more mischievous and just cleaner to see, as opposed to this flat plate, which just didn't give us the shadow behind the teeth. So I think that was a fun thing to do. And fantastic. The film ultimately went, I believe, back to Steve Johnson. And in this movie, I've only seen clips of it. But for those who know, in this book, in childhood, there's a part where in the book, the child's room turns into a forest or is a jungle, what have you. And it's just a magical book. Here, I included this because at the time of Star Trek '09, as we were looking for ideas, I was so impressed by this PlayStation commercial where they had a girl and her head was manipulated digitally. And at this time, it was just so creepy and so weird. And so I wanted to submit something like that. Of course, I'm not going to steal it directly, but what I did is a male version.